Now, after the damage wrought by Typhoon Haiyan, senior officials are now trying to get out of the path of the political storm that's blowing through the Philippines with some gusto. The blame game has begun, along with it some rather unedifying finger-pointing. President Benigno Aquino has been strongly criticised for his government's slow response to the devastation of the typhoon. He, in turn, told the BBC's Rajesh Mirchandani that it was the fault of the local authorities that weren't properly prepared for the crisis.
Well, I would like to ask these critics what else we could have done given the resources we do have, and given the magnitude of the problem.
For example, I have spoken to people in Tacloban who have told me that they were without fresh water for a week, without food for a week, and they were getting no supplies. Is that an appropriate response?
Well, perhaps we should ask the first responders, which is the local government of Tacloban. The first responders will be giving us the necessary data to tell us what they cannot meet. And again, we have the disaster risk response of this country is geared towards the empowered local government unit, who is supposed to be provide the backbone for all of the assistance that comes from the national government. The national government comes in to augment that which the local government does not need. And they're, in a sense, a unique case. So we have to admit, there was a breakdown in terms of government, and there was a cascading effect.
But, Mr. President, when you say that you want to understand the shortcomings of the municipal government and the local authorities, it sounds to some that you are saying the ultimate responsibility for this does not lie with you.
I'm sorry if I have to repeat myself.
Does the ultimate responsibility reply?
Eventually it does. I have general supervision over all. But again, the system has to rely on the local government unit, which is already in place, to provide the necessary information so that the adequate responses can be generated by the national government. So that's why I call it a backbone. When the backbone doesn't exist, what do you actually augment? The national government had to fill in so many roles. For instance, the lack of policemen. We had to bring in policemen from all across the country to augment that which was here, including the National Capital Region.
Ultimately, responsibility for this disaster lies with you.
Well, I'm the chief executive. Therefore, everything that happens ultimately resides with me. But if I may point out, if you look at the casualty figures, the overwhelming bulk of them happened in this region. And one has to ask, why this particular region? Why are some provinces, for instance, reporting zero casualties in terms of deaths? Or some of them are very, very minimal. But here, we're talking thousands already. What is the difference?
Benigno Aquino there, the President of the Philippines, talking to our correspondent Rajesh Mirchandani. Now, the relief effort is now well underway, but how do you begin to rebuild cities that have been completely destroyed? Well, with me now is Robin Cross, Managing Director of Article 25. That's a UK-based charity which sends architects and engineers to disaster zones. And Robin, very good to have you with us. Thank you very much for being with us. So,
you're welcome.
When you have got destruction that is so total, I mean, where do you begin almost?
OK, well, it's important to think on the bigger scale as well as the the emergency that we're dealing with at the moment. And certainly the international community, the international NGOs are good at responding to the very urgent needs of the first couple of weeks and months. But there's also some bigger thinking needed. How do you turn a disaster now into the impetus for longer-term resilience? The frustrating thing is that a lot of communities around the world are locked in a cycle of vulnerability. So they're hit by one disaster after another. So there's a lot of work that the international community can do to help improve the resilience of these communities in the face of a threat that will return.
Is the interesting thing, I mean, I was looking at the pictures actually from the Midwest when we were having a report on the storms that, the hurricanes that blow through on a regular basis. And you see houses that are built what look rather flimsily. It's as if they say, well, there's no point spending a fortune building a house because it's going to get blown away by a hurricane anyway. Let's build something out of, lapwood or whatever it happens to be. Now, is that the approach you take, or do you say, actually, no, we've got to fortify our properties so that if our typhoon blows through, we won't be hurt?
It certainly is very possible to design buildings which are resistant to the natural threats that are out there. It isn't always possible to make your building or your community disaster-proof, but you can make them resistant. So if we look at other disasters, not the Philippines, but if we look at, for example, earthquakes that have struck the planet, particularly those in 2010 and 11, There were three very important major earthquakes. One in Haiti, which killed 300,000 people. Another in Chile, which killed a couple of thousand people, or 500 in fact, I think. And then an earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand, which killed only 2. And the difference between 300,000 deaths and 2 deaths is the quality of the built environment. In Chile and also in Christchurch, you had a built environment which was durable in the face of a threat they knew was there. So to a certain extent, natural disasters are not natural. They are human-made.
But there's an obvious point to make there, which I'm sure anyone watching will think, well, Haiti, third world, impoverished, corrupt government, New Zealand, first world, pretty stable.
Exactly, and that's the problem, that it has to be part of a bigger developmental agenda. There isn't an instant solution to the problem in the Philippines or Haiti, but there are also opportunities for the NGOs, the international NGOs, to help improve the resilience of communities in the Philippines, for example. So we can't solve everything right away, and we can't change the economy of the Philippines, but what we can do is build storm-resistant shelters in the Philippines, which would function as schools and community centres every day. But when the typhoon is coming, and remember, we knew this typhoon was coming, when the typhoon is coming, people can move their families.
We're showing pictures, these most recent pictures that we got.
Yep.
And you just think, I mean, can anything resist a storm surge like that?
Certainly, if you locate your disaster-resistant shelters in the right place, on high ground, and probably on the first or second floor, you can build a simple, robust shelter that would survive that.
And Robin, one of the lessons of the tsunami was that we're not going to replace these houses that are right by the water's edge.
Yes, the problem there is that in Sri Lanka we started off with a half-kilometre exclusion zone. It's now fully occupied by buildings. Yeah. So it's difficult to exclude people.
Robin, absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in to be with us here on Global. Really interesting case studies that you gave us. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello, across the